3 years ago, Samuel Sterling threw his wife out on the street with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart, calling her boring and unworthy of his rising empire. He replaced her with a younger, flashier model and never looked back. But tonight, at the most exclusive royal gala of the decade, Samuel is about to learn a brutal lesson in karma. He thinks he's here to close the deal of a lifetime. He has no idea that the mysterious host queen everyone is whispering about, the woman holding his future in her diamond-clad hands, is the very same woman he left to rot. This isn't just a party, it's an execution. And Samuel just walked willingly to the chopping block. The invitation felt heavier than it looked. It was a thick slate of cream-colored cardstock, edged in genuine 24-karat gold leaf, with the embossed crest of the Grand Duchy of Laurentia shimmering under the recessed lighting of the penthouse. Samuel picked it up for the 10th time that hour, his thumb tracing the calligraphy. The Royal Winter Gala. Host, Her Serene Highness and the Board of Directors. "Stop touching it, you're going to smudge the gold," a voice snapped from the walk-in closet. Samuel turned to see Sienna stepping out. She looked undeniable. She was wearing a crimson dress that left very little to the imagination, cut dangerously low and slit dangerously high. It was a dress designed to make wives uncomfortable and husbands distracted. It was exactly why Samuel had left his marriage 3 years ago. "We need to be perfect tonight, Sienna," Samuel said, adjusting his silk tie in the mirror. "Do you know who is going to be there?" The Archibalds, the CEO of Vanguard Global, even rumors of the Belgian royal family. If I can secure a partnership with the Laurentian Fund, Apex Dynamics goes from a mid-tier firm to a global superpower. Sienna rolled her eyes, applying a final layer of gloss. I know. You're a genius. You're a shark, etc. Just make sure they photograph my good side. I need the engagement on Instagram." Samuel looked at her, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face, but he suppressed it. This was the life he had chosen, the fast life, the flashy life. 3 years ago, his life had been very different. He had been married to Genevieve. Genevieve. Even thinking her name brought a sour taste to his mouth. She had been plain. Supportive, yes. Loyal, absolutely. She had worked 2 jobs to put him through business school, cooked his meals, ironed his shirts, and listened to his practice pitches until 2 a.m. But when Samuel finally made his first million, Genevieve didn't fit the picture anymore. She wore oversized sweaters, not couture. She wanted to stay in and watch movies, not go to gallery openings in Soho. He remembered the day he ended it. It was raining. A cliché, really. He had come home, tossed the divorce papers on the kitchen table, while she was chopping vegetables for a stew. "I've outgrown us, Jen," he had said coldly. "I need a partner who looks the part. Someone who can stand next to me at a gala. Not someone who looks like they should be serving the drinks." She hadn't screamed. She hadn't thrown the knife. She had just gone very, very still. She looked at him with eyes that seemed to age 10 years in 10 seconds. "You're making a mistake, Samuel," she had whispered. "Money changes the view, but it doesn't change who you are. Don't forget that." He had laughed. He gave her the house, which was mortgaged to the hilt anyway, and a pittance of a settlement, and walked out into the arms of Sienna, his 24-year-old marketing intern. Since then, he hadn't seen or heard from Genevieve. He assumed she had moved back to her parents' farm in Oregon, or maybe she was working as a librarian somewhere, fading into the background where she belonged. "Samuel, the limo is downstairs." Sienna's shrill voice snapped him back to the present. He shook his head, clearing the memory of Genevieve's sad brown eyes. Tonight wasn't about the past. It was about the future. Apex Dynamics was struggling. The market was volatile, and he had leveraged too much capital into risky crypto ventures. He needed a bailout, and he needed it disguised as a strategic partnership. This royal gala was his last shot. "Coming, darling," he said, flashing his practiced $1,000,000 smile. They took the elevator down to the lobby of their Upper East Side building. The January air in New York was biting, but they barely felt it as they slid into the back of the hired Maybach. "So," Sienna said, pouring herself a glass of champagne from the car's console. "Who is this host, anyway?" The invitation just said, "Her Serene Highness." "Some European royal," Samuel dismissed, checking his stock portfolio on his phone. "Probably a dowager duchess or a figurehead. It doesn't matter who she is. It only matters who she knows. We just need to charm her, get access to the guest list, and close the deal with the investors." "I'll charm the men," Sienna smirked, checking her reflection in the window. "You handle the boring stuff." Samuel nodded, but a knot of anxiety tightened in his stomach. This wasn't just a party, it was a shark tank. The venue was the St. Regis Roof Ballroom, rented out entirely for the night. Security was tighter than the G20 summit. As the car wove through the traffic, Samuel rehearsed his pitch. He was a predator, a king of the concrete jungle. He had traded up from a boring wife to a trophy. He had traded a modest life for a penthouse. He was a winner. So why did he feel a cold sweat trickling down his back? "We're here," the driver announced. Samuel looked out the window. The entrance to the St. Regis was blinded by paparazzi flashes. A red carpet stretched into the lobby, flanked by security guards who looked like they were recruited from special ops. "Showtime," Samuel muttered. He took Sienna's hand. "Remember, we own this room." But as he stepped out onto the curb, the wind whipped around him, carrying a strange, foreboding chill. It felt less like a celebration and more like the calm before a storm. The ballroom was a sea of diamonds, black ties, and the kind of heavy, old money silence that screamed power. It wasn't loud. True wealth didn't need to shout. The air smelled of expensive lilies, oud wood, and chilled vintage champagne. Samuel and Sienna entered, and for a moment, Samuel felt a surge of pride. Sienna was undoubtedly drawing eyes. The crimson dress was a splash of violence against the sea of tasteful black and navy gowns worn by the socialite wives. "Eyes on us," Sienna whispered, squeezing his arm a little too hard. "They're looking." "Of course they are," Samuel murmured, puffing out his chest. But as they moved deeper into the room, Samuel realized the looks weren't exactly admiring. They were sharp, assessing, and in some cases amused. He spotted Arthur Sterling, no relation, but a man Samuel desperately wanted to impress. Arthur was the head of Sterling Voss, a private equity firm that controlled half the real estate in Manhattan. "Arthur!" Samuel beamed, steering Sienna toward the older man near the ice sculpture. "Good to see you. You remember my fiancée, Sienna?" Arthur Sterling turned. He was a man with a face like a crumpled road map and eyes like flint. He glanced at Sienna's plunging neckline, then back at Samuel. He didn't smile. "Samuel," Arthur said, his tone clipped. "Bold choice for a royal gala. The dress code was white tie and decorum." Samuel's smile faltered. "Well, you know us. We like to make an entrance." "Indeed," Arthur said, turning his back slightly. "I wouldn't get too comfortable, Samuel. I heard the hostess is particular about the guest list. I was surprised to see Apex Dynamics made the cut, considering the rumors about your liquidity." Samuel went cold. How did Arthur know about the cash flow problems? "Rumors, Arthur." "Just noise," Samuel lied quickly. "Actually, I'm here to announce a major expansion. I was hoping to get 5 minutes with the representative of the Laurentian Crown." Arthur let out a dry, barking laugh. "Good luck. The hostess hasn't come down from the royal suite yet. And when she does, well, she's not known for suffering fools, or adulterers for that matter. Arthur walked away, leaving Samuel standing there with his mouth slightly open. What a jerk, Sienna hissed. Who does he think he is? He's the man who could buy my company with his pocket change, Samuel snapped, wiping sweat from his forehead. Keep your voice down. They circulated for another 20 minutes, but the reception was frosty. The heavy hitters, the CEO of Kensington Group, the heiress to the L'Oreal fortune, the ambassadors, all seemed to form tight circles that repelled Samuel like a magnet. He was in the room, but he wasn't of the room. He grabbed a glass of whiskey from a passing waiter, his hands shaking slightly. Something's wrong, he muttered. They're treating me like a pariah. Maybe they're just jealous, Sienna said, bored. She was busy taking a selfie with the caviar station in the background. Suddenly, the lights in the massive ballroom dimmed. The murmuring crowd fell instantly silent. A spotlight hit the grand staircase at the far end of the room. A hush fell so deep you could hear the ice melting in the buckets. A man in a formal livery stepped forward with a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer boomed. "Distinguished guests, please rise for your hostess, the chairwoman of the Royal Laurentian Foundation, and the newly appointed Duchess of Valois." Samuel craned his neck. "Duchess of Valois? I thought the Laurentian royal line died out years ago." "Her Royal Highness," the announcer continued, his voice rising. "Geneviève de Valois." Samuel froze. He blinked. He shook his head, sure he had heard wrong. Geneviève? No, it was a common name. It had to be a coincidence. Then the orchestra struck up a powerful, sweeping waltz, and she appeared at the top of the stairs. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue velvet that seemed to absorb the light, shimmering with thousands of tiny crushed diamonds sewn into the fabric. She wore a tiara, not a plastic one, but a heavy, ancient thing of platinum and sapphires that sat on her head with terrifying authority. She descended the stairs with a grace that was regal, practiced, and icy. Samuel squinted. The woman was beautiful, radiant. Her skin glowed. Her hair was swept up in an intricate aristocratic style. She looked like a queen from a history book. But as she reached the bottom of the stairs and the spotlight caught her face fully, Samuel felt the floor drop out from under him. He felt the whiskey rise in his throat. It was the eyes, those brown eyes. They weren't sand anymore. They weren't pleading. They were hard, polished, and burning with a quiet, terrifying intelligence. "No," Samuel whispered, the glass slipping from his fingers and shattering on the marble floor. The sound echoed, but nobody looked at him. They were all looking at her. "What is it?" Sienna asked, annoyed by his clumsiness. "Do you know her?" Samuel couldn't breathe. He was staring at the woman he had kicked out of his kitchen 3 years ago, the woman he had called boring, the woman he had replaced. "That's—" Samuel choked out, his voice a strangled squeak. "That's my ex-wife." Sienna laughed, a loud, cackling laugh that drew dirty looks from the nearby tables. "You're joking. That goddess? Your ex-wife? The one who wore sweatpants? Samuel, you're hallucinating. That woman is royalty. She's dripping in millions." "It's her," Samuel insisted, panic rising in his chest. "I know her face. I know her walk. But how? She was a nobody. She was an orphan from Oregon." At that moment, the crowd parted. Geneviève began to walk through the room, greeting guests. She spoke to the French ambassador in fluent French. She laughed with the CEO of Goldman Sachs, touching his arm familiarly. And then she turned. Across 50 feet of crowded ballroom, her eyes locked onto Samuel. She didn't gasp. She didn't look surprised. She smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator spotting a wounded gazelle. It was a smile that said, "I've been waiting for you." She leaned over to a tall, devastatingly handsome man standing next to her, a man who looked like he was carved out of marble and money, and whispered something in his ear. The man looked at Samuel, his expression dark and dangerous. "Oh God," Samuel whispered. "She knows I'm here. She invited me." "So," Sienna scoffed, oblivious to the danger. "Go say hi. Tell her she looks good. Maybe she'll invest." "You don't understand," Samuel hissed, grabbing Sienna's arm. "I didn't just divorce her, Sienna. I destroyed her credit. I mocked her. I threw her out like garbage." The tall man who had been standing with Genevieve began walking toward them. He moved with the lethal grace of a jaguar. 2 large security guards shadowed him. "Samuel," Sienna said, finally looking nervous. "That guy looks like he wants to kill you." "Run," Samuel thought. But his feet were led. The man stopped 2 feet away from Samuel. He towered over him. "Mr. Sterling?" the man asked. His voice was deep, with a clipped British accent that sounded like it cost more than Samuel's entire life. "Yes?" Samuel squeaked. "I am Alistair Thorne, Her Highness's personal counsel and fiancé," the man said. The word fiancé hit Samuel like a physical blow. "Her Highness has requested your presence at the head table, immediately." Samuel's heart hammered against his ribs. "The head table? Why?" Alistair smiled, but his eyes remained dead cold. "She believes it is time for a reunion, and she insists you bring your companion." He glanced at Sienna with a look of utter distaste, as if she were a stain on the carpet. "Shall we?" Alistair gestured toward the front of the room, where Genevieve sat on a velvet throne-like chair, watching them. Samuel felt a wave of nausea. He wasn't walking to a dinner table. He was walking into a trap. The distance from the entrance of the ballroom to the head table was perhaps 50 yards, but for Samuel, it felt like a death march across a frozen tundra. Every step was an exercise in humiliation. As Alistair Thorne led the way, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. But they weren't parting out of respect for Samuel. They were moving aside to get a better look at the carcass being dragged to the lions. The whispers started as a low hum and rose to a deafening buzz. "Is that him? The ex-husband, the one who cheated. Look at the woman he brought. Good Lord, is that polyester?" Samuel felt the gaze of the room like 1,000 needle pricks. He was sweating profusely now, the expensive starch of his collar turning into a damp noose. Beside him, Sienna was trying to maintain her composure, strutting with a hip sway that worked in nightclubs, but looked cheap and desperate under the unforgiving crystal chandeliers of the St. Regis. "They're staring because we look good, Samuel," she whispered, though her voice wavered. She clutched his arm, her fingernails digging into his bicep. "Why is everyone so quiet?" "Shut up," Samuel hissed, his eyes fixed on the dais ahead. "Just shut up." Ahead of them, Genevieve sat. She didn't fidget. She didn't check her phone. She didn't look around nervously. She sat with a stillness that was terrifying. It was the stillness of a mountain or a loaded gun. She was flanked by the elite, the Belgian ambassador, the CEO of Vanguard Global, and a woman Samuel recognized as the matriarch of the Rockefeller family. Genevieve was chatting lightly with the ambassador, sipping water from a crystal goblet. As Samuel and Sienna approached the steps of the raised platform, Genevieve stopped speaking. She slowly turned her head. The silence in the immediate vicinity was absolute. Alistair Thorne stepped to the side, gesturing to 2 empty chairs directly across from Genevieve. "Mr. Samuel Sterling and Miss Sienna Miller," Alistair announced, his voice dripping with polite disdain. Samuel's legs felt like jelly. He stepped up onto the dais. He tried to summon the arrogant, smooth-talking CEO persona that had won him investors in the past, but in the face of this genuine, concentrated power, his charisma evaporated. "Genevieve," Samuel said. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again, louder. "Genevieve, it's been a long time." Genevieve looked at him. Her expression was unreadable. It wasn't angry. It wasn't sad. It was pleasantly vacant, as if she were looking at a waiter who had brought the wrong order. "Has it?" she asked softly. Her voice had changed. The nervous, eager-to-please tremor of the woman he married was gone. This voice was lower, smoother, resonant with authority. "I suppose it has. 3 years, 4 months, and 12 days to be exact." The precision of the date hit Samuel in the gut. She had counted. I didn't know," Samuel stammered, gesturing vaguely at the room, the diamonds, the crown. "I didn't know you were this." Genevieve finally smiled. It was a terrifyingly small smile. "You never looked, Samuel. You only ever saw what you wanted to see. A housekeeper, a stepping stone, a placeholder." She shifted her gaze to Sienna. Sienna was standing awkwardly, one hand clutching her clutch bag like a shield. "And this must be the upgrade," Genevieve said. The temperature at the table seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Sienna, isn't it? The intern." Sienna bristled. Her defense mechanism was aggression, and she wasn't smart enough to know when she was outgunned. "I'm the VP of marketing now," Sienna snapped, tossing her hair. "And we're engaged." A collective gasp went through the nearby tables. Alistair Thorne let out a low, dark chuckle. "Vice President," Genevieve repeated, tasting the words like sour wine. "Of Apex Dynamics, a company built on the initial seed money I provided from my grandmother's inheritance, if I recall correctly." Samuel paled. "Jen, please, let's not do this here." "Sit," Genevieve commanded. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. Samuel sat. Sienna sat. The moment they were seated, the tension shifted. Genevieve turned back to the Belgian ambassador, effortlessly switching to French. "Excusez-moi, monsieur l'ambassadeur. Une petite perturbation domestique." "Excuse me, Mr. Ambassador. A small domestic disturbance." The ambassador laughed, casting a pitying look at Samuel. "Of course, Your Highness. One cannot choose one's past, only one's future." Samuel sat there, his hands trembling in his lap. He was trapped. He couldn't leave. Walking out on a royal host would be social and professional suicide. He had to endure this. He looked at the silverware. It was heavy, real silver, engraved with the Laurentian crest, a wolf and a rose. He realized with a sinking horror that the crest had been on the locket Genevieve used to wear, the cheap, tarnished locket he had made fun of. "Why do you wear that junk?" he had asked her once. "It's just family history," she had replied. He had thrown that locket in the trash bin when he remodeled the bedroom for Sienna. A waiter appeared at Samuel's elbow. "Champagne, sir? It is a 1959 Dom Perignon, from Her Highness's private cellar." Samuel took the glass. He needed the alcohol. He drank half of it in one gulp, the bubbles burning his throat. He looked up to find Alistair Thorne watching him from the seat next to Genevieve. Alistair's eyes were predatory. "Enjoying the vintage, Mr. Sterling?" Alistair asked smoothly. "It's rare, usually reserved for family. But Her Highness insisted we make an exception for the man who liberated her." "Liberated?" Samuel choked. "From a life of mediocrity," Alistair said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "If you hadn't discarded her so callously, she might never have returned to Laurentia to claim her birthright. In a way, we owe you a debt of gratitude. You were the villain she needed to become a queen." Samuel felt sick. He wasn't a guest. He was a prop. He was the court jester, brought here to entertain the court with his misery. The first course arrived. It was a delicate construction of scallops and caviar, resting on a bed of dry ice that smoked gently. The presentation was theatrical, excessive, and intimidating. Samuel picked up his fork, realizing too late it was the wrong one. He saw the matriarch of the Rockefeller family use the outer fork. He quickly switched, his face burning. "So," Sienna said loudly, trying to break the suffocating atmosphere. She looked at Genevieve. "How does someone just become a princess? I mean, didn't you work at a library? Samuel said you wore sweaters from Target." The table went silent again. The audacity of the question was breathtaking. Genevieve didn't look up from her plate. She sliced a scallop with surgical precision. "I was in exile, Sienna. My family, the House of Valois, was displaced during the political upheavals in Laurentia 20 years ago. My parents were killed. I was sent to America for safety, under an assumed name, with nothing but a trust fund I couldn't access until my 30th birthday or my marriage." She paused, lifting a forkful of food to her lips. "When I married Samuel," she continued, her voice light and conversational, "I thought I could leave the royal life behind. I wanted a simple life. I wanted love. I was willing to give up a throne for a home." She finally looked at Samuel. Her eyes bored into him. "But you didn't want a home, did you, Samuel? You wanted a showroom. And when you decided I wasn't decorative enough for your showroom, you broke the covenant. My lawyers informed me that the divorce triggered the reclamation clause in my family trust. By leaving me, you unlocked my inheritance. Billions, Samuel, and the title." Samuel dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the china. Billions. He had left a billionaire heiress for an intern because he thought she was boring. He had traded a diamond mine for a rhinestone. I always knew you were special, Jen," Samuel lied, his voice trembling. I was going through a lot. The stress of the company." "The company," Genevieve interrupted. "Ah, yes, Apex Dynamics." She signaled to a waiter, who immediately brought over a sleek black tablet. Genevieve took it and tapped the screen a few times. "I've been reviewing your financials, Samuel, since we're all friends here." She turned the tablet so the table could see. It showed a graph that was nose-diving. "It seems Apex is in trouble," Genevieve said, her tone mock-sympathetic. "Leveraged to the hilt, high-risk crypto exposure, and 3 pending lawsuits for sexual harassment within the marketing department." She glanced at Sienna. "I assume that's your jurisdiction?" Sienna's mouth fell open. "That's private corporate data. How did you get that?" "I own the bank that holds your loans, my dear," Genevieve said softly. "The Laurentian Sovereign Wealth Fund acquired First City Bank last month. Didn't you read the newsletter?" Samuel felt the room spinning. She held his debt. She owned him. "Jen," Samuel pleaded, abandoning all pride. "Please, the market has been tough. I'm here tonight to find a partner, someone to help us pivot. If you could delay the loan recall for 6 months. "A partner," Genevieve mused. She looked at Alistair. "He wants a partner?" Alistair leaned forward. "Actually, Samuel, we have a proposal. We are interested in Apex Dynamics." Samuel's heart leapt. Hope. It was a dangerous, jagged thing, but he grabbed it. "You are? We have excellent IP. Our tech is sound. We just need liquidity." "We aren't interested in the tech," Alistair corrected. "We are interested in the liquidation value." "What?" Samuel whispered. "We don't want to save your company, Samuel," Genevieve said. her voice dropping to a whisper that only he could hear. "We want to buy it. For parts. And we want to do it tonight." "I won't sell," Samuel said, trying to find his backbone. "I built that company from nothing." "With my money," Genevieve reminded him sharply. "And if you don't sell, I will have the bank recall your loans tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. You will be bankrupt by noon. You will lose the penthouse, the cars, and—" She glanced at Sienna. "Likely the fiancé, once the credit cards stop working." Sienna looked at Samuel, panic in her eyes. "Samuel! What is she talking about? You said you were rich. You said we were set for life." "I am," Samuel shouted, causing heads to turn at nearby tables. He lowered his voice, his face purple with rage and fear. "I am. It's just a cash flow issue. It's a you're finished issue," Alistair said calmly. He slid a folder across the table. It slid between the wine glasses and stopped right in front of Samuel. "The contract," Alistair explained. "It transfers full ownership of Apex Dynamics to the Valois Foundation. In exchange, we forgive the debt and give you a personal stipend, enough to live modestly, somewhere far away. Perhaps a nice studio apartment in Ohio." Samuel stared at the folder. It was an ultimatum. "You can't do this," Samuel hissed. "This is a gala. This is a party. You're trying to blackmail me in front of the Belgian ambassador?" The ambassador, who had been quietly eating his pheasant, looked up. "Mr. Sterling, in my experience, Her Highness is incredibly generous. If I were you, I would take the pen." "I won't sign," Samuel said, pushing the folder away. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't make a scene here." Genevieve picked up her wine glass again. She looked at him with eyes that were ancient and tired of his nonsense. "You think this is a scene, Samuel?" she asked. "This is just dinner. The scene comes later. I have a special presentation planned for the dessert course, a retrospective of my life in America." She smiled, and for the first time it was cruel. "I kept a diary, Samuel, video journals, audio recordings, of our arguments, of the things you said to me, the way you belittled me. I've had my media team compile a very touching tribute video." She pointed to the massive 40-foot screens flanking the stage at the front of the ballroom. "It's scheduled to play right before the toast." Samuel's blood ran cold. The investors, the press, the socialites. If she played recordings of him being abusive, of him mocking her poverty, of him admitting to his ruthless business practices, he wouldn't just be bankrupt. He would be a pariah. He would be cancelled globally. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "Try me," Genevieve said. "You destroyed my self-worth for 3 years, Samuel. You made me feel small so you could feel big. Tonight, we simply balance the scales." Sienna grabbed Samuel's arm. "Samuel, if that video plays, my modeling contracts, my Instagram sponsors, they'll drop me if I'm attached to a scandal like that. Do something." Samuel looked at the folder. He looked at the screens. He looked at Genevieve, the queen he had thrown away. "If I sign," Samuel rasped, his throat dry as dust. "You don't play the video?" "If you sign," Genevieve said, "you leave. Now, quietly, through the service exit, and you never speak my name again." Samuel reached into his jacket pocket for a pen. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He felt the eyes of the table on him. The matriarch of the Rockefellers was watching him with open disgust. The ambassador was shaking his head. He opened the folder. The terms were brutal. He was signing away his life's work for pennies. "Part 5 is going to be interesting," Alistair whispered to Genevieve, loud enough for Samuel to hear. "He's breaking." But just as Samuel touched the pen to the paper, a commotion erupted at the entrance of the ballroom. "Stop!" a voice boomed. A man burst through the security line. He was disheveled, wearing a trench coat over a suit, holding a sheaf of papers. Security guards were grabbing at him, but he shoved them aside. "Don't sign it, Sterling," the man yelled. Samuel looked up. It was Marcus Vance, his former CFO, the man Samuel had fired 6 months ago to cover up the embezzlement scheme Samuel had engineered. "Don't sign it," Marcus yelled, being dragged back by security. "It's a trap. The loans aren't real. She doesn't own the bank." Genevieve's face didn't change, but Alistair stiffened. Samuel froze. The pen hovered over the paper. He looked at Genevieve. For a split second, he saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Not fear. Annoyance. "Get him out of here," Alistair barked at the security team. "Wait," Samuel said, snatching the folder back. He stood up. "Wait a minute." The dynamic of the table shattered. The air crackled with a new, chaotic energy. "She's lying," Marcus screamed as he was hauled out the doors. "Check the dates, Samuel. Check the dates." Samuel looked down at Genevieve. "You don't own the debt?" Genevieve slowly set her glass down. She sighed, a sound of elegant frustration. Marcus always was a loud mouth. She looked up at Samuel, and the mask slipped just an inch. The Queen was still there, but the gambler was visible underneath. "Sit down, Samuel," she said, her voice harder now. "Before you make a mistake, you can't undo." "No," Samuel said, a manic grin spreading across his face. He felt a surge of adrenaline. "No, I don't think I will." The silence in the ballroom was no longer heavy. It was brittle, ready to shatter. Samuel stood over the table, his chest heaving, the adrenaline of survival overriding his common sense. He looked at the folder, the document that would have stripped him of his company, and laughed. It was a jagged, ugly sound that bounced off the frescoed ceiling. "You almost had me," Samuel sneered, pointing a shaking finger at Genevieve. "You actually had me. I was seconds away from signing it all over to you." He looked around the room, making eye contact with the stunned guests. He wanted witnesses. He wanted them to see him winning. "Did you hear that?" Samuel announced, his voice booming. "The Duchess here tried to coerce me into selling my company by claiming she owned my debt. But it was a lie. It was a bluff." Sienna, sensing the shift in power, stood up beside him. She smoothed her crimson dress, her confidence returning in a rush. "I knew it," she huffed, glaring at Genevieve. "I knew you were a fake. You're just jealous because Samuel chose me. This whole royal thing is probably a scam too. Where did you rent the tiara? Broadway?" Genevieve did not stand. She did not shout. She simply watched them with an expression of mild curiosity, as if she were observing a pair of monkeys attempting to solve a calculus equation. "Are you finished?" Genevieve asked quietly. "No, I'm not finished." Samuel slammed his hand on the table, making the crystal jump. "I'm leaving, and tomorrow I'm going to sue you for defamation, attempted extortion, and fraud. I'm going to take whatever millions you actually do have. You wanted a war, Jen? You got one." Samuel grabbed Sienna's hand. "Come on, we're done with this circus." He turned to walk away, his heart soaring. He had won. He had faced down the Queen, and won. He would figure out the money later. Maybe the CFO was right. Maybe the loans were safe. "Samuel," Genevieve's voice cut through the air. It wasn't loud, but it had a stopping power that froze his feet to the floor. "I didn't say I owned the debt to bankrupt you. I said it to save you." Samuel turned back slowly, a smirk playing on his lips. "Save me? From what?" Genevieve picked up a remote control from the table. "From yourself." She pressed a button. The massive LED screens flanking the stage, the ones Samuel had feared would play a sad diary of a heartbroken wife, flickered to life. But there was no tearful music. There were no pictures of their wedding. Instead, The screen displayed a time-stamped security video. The date was from 6 months ago. The location was clearly Samuel's private office at Apex Dynamics. The resolution was 4K. The audio was crystal clear. On the screen, Samuel was sitting at his desk, holding a glass of scotch. He was talking to a man, the CFO who had just been dragged out. Video Samuel: "We're down 3 million this quarter. If the shareholders find out, the stock tanks." Video CFO: "We can't hide a loss that big, Samuel. It's illegal. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act." Video Samuel, laughing: "Screw the act. Move the debt to the shell company in the Caymans. Mark it as R&D expansion. By the time the auditors look at it, I'll have secured the new funding, and we can pay it back. Just cook the books, Marcus. Do it, or you're fired." The ballroom gasped. It was a collective intake of breath from 300 of the most powerful people in the world. This wasn't just gossip. This was a felony caught on tape. Samuel stared at the screen, his face draining of blood until he looked like a wax figure. "No," he whispered. That's a deep fake. That's AI." The video cut to a new clip. This one was dated just 2 weeks ago. Samuel was on the phone. Video Samuel: "I don't care about the safety protocols on the new engine prototype. Just get it to market. If it blows up, we settle out of court. It's cheaper to pay off a few lawsuits than to delay the launch. I need that bonus. Sienna wants a new loft." Sienna, standing next to the real Samuel, took a step back. She looked at the screen, then at Samuel, horror dawning on her face. The mention of her name tied her to his greed. "Samuel," she whispered, "you said the engine was safe." Samuel couldn't speak. He was watching his life incinerate in high definition. Genevieve placed the remote down gently. "I tried to offer you the buyout, Samuel. If you had signed the folder, the Valois Foundation would have absorbed the company, quietly paid the fines, and retired you. I was giving you a parachute." She took a sip of water. "But since you refused the mercy," she said, her voice turning to steel, "you get the justice." You hacked my office," Samuel stammered, his eyes darting around the room, looking for an exit. "That's illegal. Surveillance laws." "Actually," Alistair Thorne interjected, standing up and buttoning his jacket, "when you defaulted on your initial loan covenants 3 months ago, the bank, which, as we established, Her Highness owns, gained the right to install independent oversight auditors. Those cameras were installed by the bank. You signed the permission form in the fine print of your refinancing agreement. You really should read what you sign, Mr. Sterling." Samuel felt his knees give out. He grabbed the back of a chair to stay upright. "Turn it off," he pleaded, his voice thin and pathetic. "Please, Jen, turn it off." "I can't," Genevieve said simply, "because I'm not the only one watching." She gestured toward the back of the room. The heavy double doors swung open, but it wasn't the paparazzi. 6 men in dark suits walked in. They wore the distinct navy blue windbreakers of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Behind them were 2 officers from the NYPD. Samuel looked at Genevieve. "You called the feds?" "I didn't have to," Genevieve replied. "The SEC has been investigating Apex for months. They just needed the smoking gun. I simply invited them to the premiere." The walk of the FBI agents across the ballroom floor was agonizingly slow. The silence of the gala was absolute, save for the rhythmic thud of their tactical boots on the marble. Samuel watched them come, his mind fracturing. This couldn't be happening. He was Samuel Sterling. He was a visionary. He was supposed to be the guy who won. He turned to Sienna, desperation clawing at his throat. "Sienna, baby, listen. You have to call my lawyer. Call Shapiro. Tell him it's a setup." Sienna looked at the agents approaching, then at Samuel. The calculation in her eyes was cold and instant. She was a survivor, a parasite who knew when the host was dying. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. She recoiled from his reaching hand, as if he were contagious. "Sienna!" Samuel blinked, stunned. "I didn't know," Sienna declared, turning to face the room, playing to the audience. Tears welling up in her eyes, tears that were impressively fake. "I had no idea. He lied to me too. He told me everything was legal. I'm a victim here." She pulled the engagement ring, a massive, gaudy diamond, off her finger. "I don't want this blood money," she sobbed, throwing the ring at Samuel's chest. It bounced off his tuxedo lapel and rolled under the table. "Sienna!" Samuel cried out, the betrayal stinging more than the impending arrest. "We're partners." "We were never partners," she hissed, her mask fully dropped, revealing the scorn beneath. "I was an asset, and you just became a liability." She picked up her skirts and hurried away from him, disappearing into the crowd near the bar, distancing herself from the blast zone. Samuel stood alone. The lead FBI agent stopped in front of the dais. He didn't look at Genevieve. He looked straight at Samuel. "Samuel Sterling?" the agent asked. "There's been a mistake," Samuel said, putting his hands up, a reflex of guilt. "That video is out of context. I was joking. It was locker room talk." "You have the right to remain silent," the agent droned, pulling a pair of metal cuffs from his belt. The sound of the ratchet clicking open echoed through the silent ballroom. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "No, wait," Samuel panicked. He looked at Arthur Sterling, the investor he had tried to impress earlier. "Arthur, tell them, I'm good for it." Arthur Sterling looked at his fingernails, ignoring him completely. The agent grabbed Samuel's wrist. It wasn't gentle. He spun Samuel around, forcing his hands behind his back. The cold steel of the handcuffs bit into his skin, pinching the flesh. It was a sensation of utter finality. "Genevieve!" Samuel screamed, twisting his head to look at her. She was still sitting there, calm, regal, untouchable. "Help me, I was your husband. We had a life." Genevieve stood up. She signaled for the agent to pause. The agent, respecting the venue and the host, held Samuel in place, but allowed him to face her. Genevieve walked down the steps of the dais. She moved until she was inches from him. She smelled of roses and cold vengeance. "We did have a life, Samuel," she said softly. "And you traded it for a sports car and an ego boost. You told me I was unworthy of your empire. Do you remember?" Samuel nodded frantically, tears streaming down his face, ruining his spray tan. "I'm sorry. I was an idiot. I'm sorry, Jen." "You aren't sorry you did it," Genevieve corrected him. "You're sorry you lost." She leaned in closer, so only he could hear. "And by the way," she whispered, "the ring you gave Sienna, the one she just threw at you, it's a cubic zirconia. I had the jeweler swap it out 3 months ago when you sent it for resizing. I bought the real diamond back. It's in my safe. I figured you wouldn't notice the difference. You never really knew quality when you saw it." Samuel stared at her, his mouth hanging open. The level of control, the depth of the planning. It was terrifying. She hadn't just beaten him. She had dismantled his entire reality piece by piece. "Take him away," Genevieve said, stepping back and smoothing her velvet gown. "You're a witch!" Samuel screamed as the agents began to drag him toward the exit. "You're a monster!" "I am a queen," Genevieve replied, her voice ringing clear across the ballroom. "And you are trespassing in my court." As Samuel was hauled away, kicking and screaming like a child, the flashing lights of the police cruisers outside illuminated the ballroom windows. The paparazzi were going to have a field day. The headlines were already writing themselves. The doors slammed shut, cutting off his screams. The ballroom was silent for 3 heartbeats. Then, Genevieve turned back to the crowd. She picked up a glass of champagne. Her hand was perfectly steady. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her smile returning, bright and dazzling. "I apologize for the entertainment. It seems the clown arrived late. Please, enjoy the dessert. The chocolate soufflé is particularly excellent tonight." For a second, no one moved. Then, the Belgian ambassador began to clap. Then Arthur Sterling. Then the Rockefellers. Within seconds, the entire room was giving her a standing ovation. They weren't clapping for the arrest. They were clapping for the power move. In their world, ruthlessness was the highest virtue, and Genevieve had just proven she was the apex predator. She sat back down, taking a sip of the vintage Dom Perignon. Alistair leaned over, a genuine smile on his face. "That went well, I think." "Better than expected," Genevieve murmured. "I thought he would cry sooner." "What about the girl?" Alistair asked, nodding toward where Sienna was frantically texting in the corner. "Leave her," Genevieve said dismissively. "She has no money, no job, and her reputation is ruined. Obscurity is a far worse punishment for a narcissist than prison. She'll fade away." Genevieve looked at the empty chair where Samuel had sat. She felt a lightness in her chest she hadn't felt in 3 years. The ghost was gone. The debt was paid. But there was one final loose end. "Alistair," she said. "Yes, Your Highness. The house in Oregon, the one he forced me to sell. We reacquired it this morning," Alistair confirmed. "It's in your name again. The garden is a bit overgrown, but the structure is sound." Genevieve smiled, a real, warm smile this time. "Good. I think I'll go there for the spring. I need a break from being a queen." 6 months later, the winter frost had melted, giving way to the vibrant greens of spring in the Willamette Valley. Far away from the noise of Manhattan, on a secluded farm in Oregon, Genevieve knelt in the soil. She was wearing denim overalls and muddy boots, her hair tied back in a messy bun. There were no diamonds today, no velvet gowns, no flashbulbs, just the smell of wet earth and the sound of birdsong. She patted the dirt around the base of a newly planted rosebush. It was a grand Gala rose, a deep, blood-red variety. "A fitting tribute," a voice called out from the porch. Genevieve wiped her hands on a rag and stood up, shielding her eyes from the sun. Alistair was leaning against the railing of the farmhouse, holding 2 mugs of tea. He had traded his bespoke Italian suits for a thick wool sweater and corduroys, though he still looked out of place among the chickens and the pickup truck. "It blooms best after a hard winter," Genevieve said, walking up the steps to join him. She took the tea, the ceramic warm against her palms. "Did the news come in?" Alistair nodded, his expression serious. "The verdict was read an hour ago. Guilty on all counts: securities fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The judge wasn't lenient, given the video evidence and the lack of remorse." "How long?" Genevieve asked, taking a sip. 12 years, Alistair said. "Federal prison. No parole for at least 10. Apex Dynamics has been officially dissolved, and its assets liquidated to pay back the investors." Genevieve looked out over the rolling hills of her family farm, the home she had fought so hard to reclaim. 12 years. Samuel would be in his 50s when he got out. He would emerge into a world that had forgotten him, with nothing to his name but a criminal record. "And Sienna?" she asked. "The engagement was annulled, obviously," Alistair replied with a dry smirk. "Last I heard, she was trying to launch a lifestyle blog, but the comment section was unkind. She's currently working as a hostess at a chain restaurant in New Jersey. It seems the upgrade didn't hold its value." Genevieve felt a strange sensation in her chest. She expected triumph. She expected a surge of vindictive joy, but all she felt was a quiet, heavy relief. The weight was gone. The ghost that had haunted her, the voice in her head that said she wasn't good enough, had been silenced by the gavel of a judge. "It's over," she whispered. "It is," Alistair agreed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "And one final piece of business. We found this in the evidence locker. It was confiscated from Samuel's personal safe during the raid." He opened the box. Inside lay a tarnished silver locket, the wolf and the rose. It was the necklace Samuel had thrown in the trash. He must have fished it out, perhaps realizing it was silver, or maybe just to keep it as a trophy of the woman he had crushed. Genevieve took the locket. Her thumb traced the dented metal. It wasn't perfect anymore. It was battered, scratched, and worn. "It's damaged," Alistair said softly. "We can have it restored, polished." Genevieve shook her head, clasping the chain around her neck. "No," she said, looking at him with eyes that were clear and strong. "Leave the scratches. They remind me that I survived." She turned back to the garden, where the new roses were just beginning to unfurl in the sunlight. She wasn't just a duchess, or a CEO, or a divorcee. She was Genevieve, and for the first time in a long time, the future looked entirely her own. And that is the story of how Samuel Sterling learned the hardest lesson of all. Be careful who you step on while you're climbing the ladder, because they might just be the one holding it when you fall. Samuel thought wealth made him a king, but he forgot that true royalty isn't about what you wear. It's about how you treat people. In the end, he lost his empire, his freedom, and his reputation, all because he underestimated the quiet strength of the woman he cast aside. Genevieve proved that the best revenge isn't screaming or fighting. It's succeeding, thriving, and letting karma handle the rest. What did you think of Genevieve's plan? Was the video reveal at the gala too harsh, or did Samuel get exactly what he deserved? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice and karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We drop new dramas every week. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.